these guys in the Bank of England and also Keynes, when they said that the Bank of England is above, they weren't talking about giving, were they? They were talking about setting the interest rate, but not about giving. I mean, this is new. Can we say that?
I'm not sure, because it's the same guy who said, you know, why does Steiner have to make it so complicated? You know, why do you have to spell everything out? It doesn't necessarily help. And I'm saying, maybe. So in this case, it's a very important case, because if, you know, figure out how the Bank of England works, you figured out how every central bank in the world works. This is not an innocent topic to take, or an innocent example. This is, you're going right back to the grey time, to the foundation of the Bank of England, the mother of all central banks. So when we touch the Bank of England, we're touching, you know, the whole universe of central banks, where they came from, where they got to, and where they're headed. Touch the Bank of England, you touch history. These people, if you know who these people are, you know what their responsibility, you know how it works. If you spend time in the archive of the bank, if you go in among these people in their daily life, their daily existence, why I'm saying this is they have huge responsibility, huge influence, huge policy. They describe policy, they invent policy. You know, the whole world we live in is central bank independence. They are the authors of it, of free market theory. They are the authors. Free banking, get rid of the central banks. When you work with these people, when you know them, when you have coffee with them, as it were, this is very real information I'm trying to impart as discreetly as I can do it. I haven't named them yet, but almost. Now, they never talk about giving, to answer your question ultimately, because they would say, why would we? They wouldn't ever say this, but they would say, why would we? It's not part of our vocabulary. But they listen very attentively, in my judgment anyway, to what I might be bringing in Steiner's, because they know the current monetary system does not work. It is not in balance. They have a way of explaining it. Well, you can't, you know, that's the market. So a market will sort it all out. We don't have to concern ourselves with this, because on that level, they're pretty Darwinian, you know. So we know it's not working, but we trust the market. This is why many people, Hayek, for example, and these people are Hayekian, if you want to say in that sense. That's why Hayek would say, and it's very important what Hayek says. He doesn't quite mean it the way I'm going to say it. He says, and this is indirectly answering your question. Hayek says, Kant says, there are limits to knowledge. So Hayek accepts this, meaning we just stay in the box and we're not going to go out of it. There are limits to knowledge. We accept this from Kant and that's it. So we're not even going to go outside the box. We might prefer to being, wouldn't it be nice to be outside the box, but we're not going to go there. We're staying Kantian. And therefore, says Hayek, he doesn't mean to say it the way I'm going to say it, therefore, no single human being, nor all human beings together, should claim they have a wisdom higher than that of the market. This follows from being Kantian. Because I've shut down my antenna, because I've limited my knowledge because of Kant, because I subscribe to his theories, because of this, I am not able to comprehend the entire universe, nor should I pretend I'm able to. And therefore, I have to trust to the markets, and I have to obey the markets when they speak. This is the origin of all free market thinking. It's very powerful. If you're not Kantian, things are very different. If you're Aristotelian, let's say, when you say there are no limits to knowledge, now you're beginning to claim that you are as wise as the markets and the world should obey you. This is very, very powerful. And then once you understand this, you can see, well, if you go down that path, we're heading for very serious anarchy. And now I'm going to say something very strange. And we will have to understand this anarchy will in the end be regulated by karma. We're going to have to find our relationships, our karmic relationships. Why am I born here? Why am I this language? Why am I in that country? We're going to have to figure out all this stuff. Why are we together on Earth at this point in time with these problems? And karma will be the allocator of all this, or the the way to understand all this is not coincidental. It's at this point in time we have these problems, that you're in Israel and I'm in England and all the rest of it. And when you understand that, if you accept this notion, at least from Steiner's point of view, you're going to come to the idea, ultimately, there is a lord of karma. There is some kind of higher principle that's going to make sense of this karmic anarchy. You have to, otherwise we're just heading for the war of all against all, basically. I mean, that's just obvious, right? If you and I can't, in our autonomy from one another, find some similar set of values, we're heading for a clash, right? Let alone the 10 billion other people who want to have their own set of values. So there's some ordering principle, and you can then talk about Lord of Karma. Well, if you take this image that our autonomy will lead us to look for and obey some ordering principle without any loss of autonomy, then you can immediately understand what the market is all about. If you deny yourself, if you put limits on your knowledge, you will not be able to escape. Something beyond your consciousness is operating, not the price mechanism. The way you're organized, the way you're is what's allocating everything, not the price mechanism. Whether you're rich, whether you're famous, whether you were lucky to be born, all this kind of stuff, who you know and everything else is actually allocating capital, not the price mechanism. Forget it. And then you will come into that world, and then you see, well, okay, in that world, which I'm not allowing myself to become conscious of, then I can see I listen to that world, and then when it speaks, I obey it. And I'm doing this deliberately in front of this drawing, because now you can see whether it's the Lord of Karma, whether it's the wisdom of the market, I will now obey it in the fray of self-interest. Because in self-interest, I block systematically any wider awareness of what I'm doing. I hope this is, I'm looking at myself, as I said, trying to make use of this drawing behind me, because this is a very, very powerful image. It's just showing in a modern economy today, every individual has to be able to function like this. And then if every individual functioning like this, obviously the economy will balance itself. So when they made this decision, this definition in 1994, the 300th anniversary of the founding of the Bank of England was the reason for the book. By then you had 300 years of the Bank of England, and they'd had to get clear, what is the ultimate, where have we got to in this story? And where they got to is what Keynes says in his Tract on Monetary Reform in 1923. We've got to the point where there is some monetary authority, that's Keynes' word, not central bank, which we accept collectively will oversee our conduct in the realm of goods, in the realm of capital. That's how Keynes describes it. And now if you say monetary authority, not central bank, it means it's a monetary authority we all accept. It's not a monetary authority doing to us anything. It's just something we accept. So I call this citizenized central banking. It's like when the Dutch choose to speak in English in a conference, it's not because the English told them they had to. Something has now arisen where we see there's a higher order of conduct which we can subscribe to consciously, deliberately, and we don't obey it, right? We embody it. See what I mean? It's not anything done to us. We do it to ourselves. When Keynes calls that monetary authority, that is the point in economic history and in the history of economics also, 1920, we could have paused there. And then if you go and look at Steiner's lectures given at the same time, he has no concept of a monetary authority except I am a monetary authority. And already at that point in history, which we haven't moved away from one iota, we still have the question, when will I, if I use the language, when will my private inflationary stance match that of the central bank? Because until my own behavior lacks inflation, I'm using the jargon, until in my own behavior, I remove the inflationary actions, the central bank can do nothing. It's lost all power of managing inflation. You can see that. I won't go into all the detail. It likes to pretend it's still doing it, but it hasn't got a hope in hell of managing inflation behavior now, because the central bank no longer has the powers it used to have. It just, all it can do is reflect back our lack of inflationary or our inflationary behavior. and it's well known in the history of central banking, especially recently, people do, before the European Union, before the European Central Bank, people always pointed to the Bundesbank in Germany because it was the model of central banking. And why it was the model of central banking, apart from the fact it was carefully the central bank of Western Germany, so it didn't have any real issues to deal with, like Eastern Germany gave to it when it became unified. So it was a fake world, Western Germany. But it was always said of the German people, they just do not know how to behave other than in a non-inflationary manner. So the example was given, how many people do you need to change a light bulb in Germany? 1. How many people do you need to change a light bulb in England? 5. That was a joke example. 1 to hold the ladder, 1 to make the tea, eventually 1 to change the light bulb. And the reason the Bundesbank was so successful in those terms was because the German people as such are non-inflationary. They wouldn't know how to be inflationary. So the Bundesbank had an easy task. It simply reflected the non-inflationary behavior of German people. Come to England or come to a sunny climate, like Brazil, good luck. The inflationary stance of the Brazilians because of the sun, because of samba, and I don't know what else, right, is not into zero inflation. No way, So I'm saying this again, I'm saying it at length, because in these anecdotal kind of stories, you can kind of get a sense at that point in 1923, when Keynes was saying in Western, so-called Western evolution, we need to talk about a monetary authority, he wasn't going on to say that has to be a central bank. We can say he meant central bank, but he didn't say that. He said monetary authority. And at that point in history, you have to say, well, who now is the monetary authority in this universe? Is it someone outside me, or is it me? And if it's me, I'm going to have to understand this as a citizen, not as instructed by the central bank. It's going to be done through my use of money, not its control of my use of money, which is until maybe the 80s, the central bank controlled how you use money. At least in England, it did. It controlled how much money you could take in and out of a country. It controlled the bank rate, it controlled all sorts of things. So your monetary behavior was done to you until the 80s, and we threw all that in the bin because we thought by the 90s, I'm being generous to my colleagues, but by the 1980s, we thought humanity got to a point where we can trust to the citizens to have the same consciousness as the enlightened princes in central banks. This is their language, not mine. And there's a certain truth in this historically, at least in terms of historical potential, in terms of historical facts. We've never been educated to this level of consciousness anywhere at all. So it's kind of a bit disingenuous to assume humanity is now ready to have central bank independence thrust upon it, or markets opened up and all sorts of things like this. But the justification for that was always an assumption that by the time we get to the 1980s, I mean in the whole evolution of humanity, 1980s, I don't mean 40 years ago. I mean, look at the long history of human evolution and arrive at 1980, not 1970 and not 1990, 1980. Their expectation was by this point in humanity's long journey, he's now on the curve upwards. The curve's not on the drawing anymore, but he's now on the way up. He's heading to the final participation. He's now at 1980, he's not at 1776 anymore, which is my nadir point. So if you take all this in and you take it seriously, and it's not just me blagging away here, then at this point, they were assuming something which is potentially the case, potentially true, but practically not in place. Because in 1923, we said monetary authority equals central bank. We could have said monetary authority means raising the financial literacy of everybody in the country. If we'd said that, we would have needed to look at Steiner's lectures. Because in a way, that's what they enable you to become. And so I'm going all around, all over the place. In the background, there's this drawing quite consciously. And if we live into this drawing and all that it means and can be made to mean, it simply has the consequence there will be no central banks in the world. because my own behavior is doing everything. It's regulating in my own economy, my own balance sheet. I will regulate revenue and capital as far as I am concerned. And that will mean systematically identifying how much capital I'm carrying in my balance sheet, which is mine in law, but it's actually out via the financial system financing somebody else. And I can just identify this on my balance sheet. I don't have to do anything about it, but I can become conscious that I am, on the one hand, in business, and on the other hand, I'm a mini financial market for which I am responsible. And now I can touch the whole world of the financial markets, the little bit that I am responsible for, I can get traction in. And I'm no longer able to say, there's a financial market, it's about this, I can do nothing, I have to wait for a market correction. And if you do this systematically, you become independent of all these market corrections. They're not driving you, you're not worried about them. There's nothing to correct in your healthy balance sheet. And so all this is heading into the notion of financial literacy. I haven't yet got into Steiner's talk about money, because I'm deliberately trying to see, when do we need to talk about Steiner in this story? And so far, not at all.